Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 5:30 News on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Jay Kohn. Janelle off this evening. Large rocks tumbling off the rims again this week. This time, though, it's part of a concerted effort to prevent yet another rock slide in Billings. That's right, men with brightly colored fluorescent shirts hanging off the rims today as they work to try to prevent more rock slabs from falling. Watch here as this 200-ton boulder comes crashing down, this right above Mountain View Boulevard. Terracon consultants have been hired to do preventative work as it tries to ensure that more rim chunks don't fall in that area in the future. But in order to do that, they had to force two giant boulders off of the rim wall. And get this, how do they do it? Well, using what are basically inflatable pillows.
If it's in a position where you can, go ahead and push the rock off, make it fall, and then rather than wait for it to happen at some odd time and possibly injure somebody or damage some property.
Now, you may recall this past June when a large rock slide damaged a Billings garage and crushed a vehicle on Mountain View Boulevard. Now, usually crews would use dynamite to bring the big rocks down, but because of the close proximity of homes, Terracon has opted for the inflatable pillow technology, which they say prevents the smaller rocks from shooting out. The man who died in the crash of his experimental aircraft at the Billings airport this week has now been identified. The Yellowstone County Coroner's Office says 74-year-old Robert Larry Kohn of Billings died from multiple blunt force trauma. Authorities say the accident was not medical related. Kohn's experimental gyrocopter crashed into a private hangar at Billings Logan International Airport just before 1 o'clock Wednesday afternoon. Now, the aircraft was a gyrocopter, very similar to helicopters, but they are smaller and fly lower and slower. The NTSB and the FAA started their investigation into the crash this morning. One of the most expensive campaigns in Montana this political year is over Initiative 185. That's the measure that would raise tobacco taxes and make permanent Montana's expanded Medicaid coverage for poor adults. The airwaves statewide have been blanketed with ads financed by the tobacco industry opposing the measure. MTN's chief political reporter Mike Dennison tonight takes a closer look at the numbers behind those ads and the contents of Initiative 185.
You've probably seen or heard the anti-185 ads that say initiative supporters aren't telling the truth about what it actually does. Here's an excerpt.
185 is a massive new tax increase that deceptively claims to fund Medicaid expansion, but doesn't provide enough new revenues to pay for it. So instead of fully funding Medicaid expansion, it creates a permanent unfunded mandate of $34 million a year that you'll have to pay for.
Medicaid expansion, which provides health coverage to 96,000 low-income adults in Montana, is set to expire next June. If voters approve I-185, the program is extended indefinitely. I-185, if passed, would earmark $26 million a year of the revenue it generates for Medicaid expansion. But the state's spending on the program is projected to be about $60 million a year, thus the $34 million unfunded mandate. Supporters of I-185 argue this unfunded mandate doesn't really exist. They say expanded Medicaid also saves the state $31 million a year by providing a better federal match for people that would be covered by Medicaid anyways, and that another $5 million will be paid each year in small premiums from people covered by the program. Together, these savings essentially erase any shortfall, they say. The ads against I-185 also don't mention that Medicaid expansion brings more than $500 million of federal money into the state each year that pays medical bills for thousands of people and creates jobs. Yet the ads against 185 note correctly that a lot of the money raised by the initiative go to programs other than Medicaid expansion. If approved, I-185 would raise taxes on a pack of cigarettes by $2 and by 67% on other tobacco products like moist snuff. Nearly 1/3 of the revenue from these higher taxes would finance existing programs like the Children's Health Insurance Plan, state building construction, and operation of state veterans nursing homes. 1/5 of the money, $15 million a year, just goes into the state treasury with no earmarks. And another $10 million a year goes to 3 new programs, services for veterans, including anti-suicide efforts, smoking prevention, and in-home services for elderly people with low income. So, as you can see, 185 is about more than just Medicaid expansion, although making that program permanent would be a significant step for Montana. Reporting from Helena, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
Thank you, Mike. The campaign for and against Initiative 185 has already topped $11 million. That includes money raised by both sides. 2 tobacco firms alone, though, have contributed nearly $9 million of that total. Near the small community of Clarkston, Montana, some 10 structures, including 3 homes, have burned in this week's Horseshoe wildfire. Tonight, MTN's Mallory Peebles takes us to the fire lines to get an up-close look at the firefighting effort.
This is the worst of it, a home, a complete loss. But just 100 yards away, there's a structure that was saved, proof that a fire's path is anything but predictable. Buckets of water sit next to a charred hose. A melted basketball hoop hangs, and a foundation sits with nothing above.
I'm sure there was a fairly large ember shower that was being casted down onto this house.
When you look back at the peak of the Horseshoe fire, you can see its fury. Flames reached 50 feet in length, according to officials. With wind and dry heat, conditions were perfect for it to spread quickly. And it did. More than 1,300 acres, most within the first few hours. In total, 10 buildings were lost, including 3 homes, at least.
There may be other structure remains there, but we cannot identify what they are.
Gallatin County Sheriff's Office is working to get a final count on what's been lost, and fire crews continue to work on containment.
Basically doing what we call gridding, looking for hot spots along the edge. We start on the outside edge of the fire and then we work our way in. Weather conditions have improved, but the ground is still dry and juniper trees are trapping heat. Even without high-stretching flames, the fire is holding on. To be honest, we are still kind of in that fire season. We're in the middle of September, but it's dry. The weather hasn't really decided whether it wants to turn to fall or stay summer. With so much still at risk, crews don't plan to leave anytime soon. People are able to return to their homes or what's left to begin salvage and recovery. Reporting from Clarkston, I'm Mallory Peebles with MTN News.
Mallory tells us at least 2 dogs are still missing in that fire, but at this point there have been no livestock or any other pet casualties. A Billings Bar and Grill is starting anew by changing its name in hopes of changing its reputation. Bones Arcade closed today, but the business plans to reopen on Monday of next week with a new name as the Plaza Arcade Bar. The general manager tells us they're rebranding and revamping, trying to combat an old reputation.
You know, they had some great things going here in the past, and then I know there were some issues, and they've had some problems in the past with just unfortunate events, and that's what we're trying to erase. We want to really show the community that we are changing. Different food, different environment, different establishment, just different all around and a lot more fun and exciting.
So the new Plaza Arcade Bar reopens Monday at 3 o'clock and also will feature an entirely new menu. Still ahead on tonight's 5:30 News, the Moss Mansion now at ease after some expertise freed their trees of bees. And coming up in sports, Scott checks in with both your Cats and Grizz. They're less than 48 hours away from Week 3 kickoff.
And coming up in weather, the big weather story is Hurricane Florence. We'll have the latest on that. Plus, back here in Montana, we've got some mild temperatures, but for how long will they last? We'll have the answer on that coming up in just a few more minutes.
You're watching MTN News with Jay Kohn and Janelle Slade. Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire. And sports with Scott Green. This is the 5:30 News on Q2, Montana's news leader.